What's up, everybody? I'm here with my buddy,
my goodness.
Jason Silva. We've been friends for quite some time.
A couple years, yeah.
A couple decades.
Yeah.
Yeah, and not only is he a friend, but he's also a mentor. Our lives have been intertwined, but mostly from afar.
Yes.
And in fact, over the years, you have been somebody that I look up to, that I actually seek out whenever I'm going through something. And I'm like, well, what would Jason say about this? You know, how would Jason's wisdom inform my current situation? So here I am now, choosing a life on the farm, learning how to homestead and ranch. And so I thought I'd come to you and just, shoot the breeze with you and get some little nuggets of wisdom that you might bequeath me today.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at your shirt, your famous...
My famous shirt. My buddy's shirt from Imaginary Foundation.
Yes.
So this is part of his, the Venn commandments is what he calls them. So instead of the 10 commandments, it's the Venn diagrams, and they share a lot of wisdom. This one is about finding balance between chaos and order, or structure and chaos.
Well, it might have something to do with nature's design as well. It looks
Very much so, yes. Thank you for those kind words, by the way.
True story.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean it. I really do.
Appreciate that.
I mean, I have like a little folder of videos that I keep, and you like
I'm in there?
populate it.
I'm in there.
You and Jamie Wheel, and probably some other characters that you're in good company.
Well, I firstly, I'm honored, and for those that are listening, it's interesting. I watched the interview you did with Jamie Wheel, where you sort of talked about your existential journey, your sort of dark night of the soul, and the questions you started asking yourself after, in some ways, tasting what for most people is what they most desire. Whether it's success or validation from others, fame and fortune and all that jazz. And then your very, in some ways, earnest disclosure that didn't fill your soul, didn't satiate the needs of your psyche. And I thought that was incredibly resonating. And I think in some ways you went from, being this kind of pop culture person to then in some ways becoming a very influential voice for those that are going through their own dark night of the soul. And so I resonate with that, and I feel very flattered that obviously that you've connected with my content over the years, and I'm happy to share.
Well, I also realized that I lived a very controlled life, and your content, Shots of Awe, really invited me to humble myself to something greater, something bigger, something out of my control. And in fact, especially, being in Hollywood, and it's all fake, right? Like everything is a performance, a show, a fantasy.
Sure.
And I really needed to dive into something real and tangible.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm looking around here. We're in Miami for our Basel. I would have loved to have you on the ranch. We usually shoot in nature, but this is the best.
A little bit here.
This is the best we could get.
Nature's being very breezy outdoors, so we had to insulate ourselves at least a little bit.
But so like this idea of like something fake or not real and tangible, and then like going into something really sometimes uncomfortably real and getting to work.
That's interesting.
Wake up,
Yeah.
show up, clean up.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think in some ways, I had my first existential crisis as a teenager. I read a book that I've talked about in many of my videos by Ernest Becker. It's called The Denial of Death. And the book basically says that the worm at the core of the human condition, what ultimately drives us but also plagues us, is the fact that we're uniquely aware of our mortality. And so he says that we've come up with like these 3 solutions to deal with the unbearable weight, the unbearable anxiety of being aware that like in the end we die. How terrifying that is to creatures that can dream and creatures that can love like us. And the 3 solutions to the problem of death, he says, are the religious solution, which of course is traditional religious ideology. It's like read the holy book and you'll be saved, right? And live in heaven with God. The second solution to the problem of death is the romantic solution. And that's the one that has to do with projecting others and raising them into pedestals. She's like the wind, she's my salvation, she is the sun. And in some ways, I would say part of the romantic solution is also the self-aggrandizing solution. I'll become famous and then I'll transcend the human condition. I won't age, I won't die, I will transcend my animality by basically becoming a living God. And it's interesting to have this conversation with you because, as a kid growing up in South America, Hollywood was even farther for us than for somebody living in the US. And so it was even more of a fantasy of like, wow, like in that world, you become these gods on these giant screens. Maybe these people don't have that same existential angst that I have. They get to sit there and pontificate about art and aesthetics, and it's like they don't have to deal with like the human pain that I have to deal with, and so on and so forth. And so it was very compelling to me over time that these heroes in the entertainment industry, these artists that I worship, were also plagued by existential distress. I sent you that clip of Mel Gibson talking about how when he was in the pinnacle of fame and fortune in the secular utopia, the more he ate, the emptier he felt. It was the example that he gave. Mm-hmm. So that was really interesting because in a sense it was a crushing disappointment. It was like, oh, no matter how much material success you achieve, no matter how much fame you achieve, it won't heal this broken thing in our psyche that needs some kind of like deeper meaning to inform our lives in the face of death, at least according to Becker's interpretation. Now, I don't know if for you the existential crisis was directly related to your mortality, but I suspect it was directly related to the need for meaning, where maybe you didn't feel like all this fame, all this adulation, all this celebration of you was enough. Like it just didn't fill you. Well, I don't know.
No, I think it did directly relate to my mortality. In fact, the more I went down the path of indulgence and immediate gratification, the more it was a lesson in mortality, because I was like desperate to accumulate and to store it all up and to have all the experiences because I knew one day I would die. So I had to do it all right then and there. And it was definitely not connected to a spiritual infinite experience. It was finite and desperate.
Yeah. Well, there you go. I mean, it's like fame and fortune won't save you from death and taxes, unfortunately. But one of the things I think that is, for me at least, in a much smaller scale, I got into the storytelling business and entered into the Hollywood world a little bit, and I did that television show, Brain Games, and I remember also wondering whether that would resolve my own anxieties and my own itches, and I did that for several years, and in the end it wasn't totally satiating, and I have found that for me the only thing that really fulfills me is experiences in which I can vanish. So it's actually the opposite of like self-adulation or self-celebration or validation in the eyes of others. It's about disappearing completely. And by disappearing, I mean the disappearing of like the inner chatter, the disappearing of like the inner voice. It's like doing something you love so much, you vanish into that activity. You become that activity. Whether you're feeling that when you're talking about nature, when you're talking about sustainability, like you're caught up in something larger than yourself. So you actually vanish. And if anything, now you get to capitalize in a much more healthy way on the attention that you receive as a known person, because now you can be a deflector. Oh, you think I'm cool? I shine a light on this important issue. And I think it's happened to other talented performers. Leonardo DiCaprio is another superstar that's focused on the environment. It's like, I think it has to do with making your life about something in which you can vanish, in which it's not about you. There's a great line by Jerry Garcia, and he's talking about getting high and psychedelics, and we can get into that. But he says to get really high ultimately is to forget yourself. But when you forget yourself, you see everything else. And I think that's the gift. It's like, awareness persists, but self-obsession disappears. And when you see everything else, well, it's like being twice born. You're like re-virginized. I mean, I watch your videos on the farm and I'm like, oh my God, dude. It's like the star of Entourage is marveling at these beautiful plants that are growing in the soil of his backyard. But think about it. I mean, even a blade of grass, when given our full attention, is radiant. Henry Miller said that. It's a divine thing. I mean, nature is miraculous. It's just that we don't pay attention to it because we're so self-involved and so caught up in our own stories. Yeah. And so...
And when we pour concrete and try and make it an expression of our ego or domination.
Yes.
And you know, I find that being in nature really heals that like sense of isolation and separation and loneliness.
Yeah.
You know, and it's not mediated to give you attention or serve you anything or sell you anything.
Yeah.
And it really needs us. I feel like it needs our care, our stewardship directly, not by giving money to an organization. And just, you know, vaguely helping through bureaucrats and in governments. It's about directly being present and participating in helping the planet, and it helps you right back.
Well, 100%. I mean, I think it was Carl Sagan. He said, "We are a way for the cosmos to know itself." You know, I think people make a mistake in thinking that we are somehow separate from nature. You know, like we sprouted out of nature like a flower sprouts from the soil. You know, and what's interesting is the things that sprout from us, whether it's our tools and technologies, are also another form of nature. There was this great article called "What is a Meme?" and it was talking about memes, which are essentially ideas, as the new genes. And so this new kingdom that rises above the biosphere, and the citizens of this kingdom are ideas. But ideas can either make the world better, ideas like sustainable technology and renewable energy and solar and so on and so forth. You know, ideas that also things like the printing press and the internet and tools and technologies that are kind of amazing. But there are also horrible ideas, like acting like parasitic agents, consuming all of our natural resources unsustainably and leading us straight to hell. That's not very mindful. That's not a very good idea. And in the end, the best idea wins. You know, there's a great sentence by Edward O. Wilson. He says, "We have Paleolithic brains, medieval laws, and godlike technology. Because for better or worse, we do have the tools to both create and destroy." That's the tools of gods, right? Like Stuart Brand, who wrote the Whole Earth Catalog. He said, "We are as gods and might as well get good at it." And so our responsibility actually isn't, I think, to cower away, but to like seize this role that we've been given through our capacity for abstract thought and so on and so forth, our understanding of mathematics and physics and chemistry and so on and so forth. It's like, how do we like be the best possible example, you know, for future generations, but also like to be the embodiment of a recursively self-improving nature. Like if we are a way for the cosmos to know itself, like, so let's like be agents to make this planet we live in like more sustainable through renewable technologies, so that we can free the brave, reckless gods that live inside of us, as D.H. Lawrence said.
Well, I find that I had to escape or leave the programming of modern culture, which I think is full of bad ideas and bad memes.
There's a lot of bad memes,
and they're seductive, and they want us to be selfish and narcissistic and indulgent, and quite destructive in many ways. And I had to leave that in order to rewrite the program, sort of to have that ego death, and then be born again as a true emergent being of nature, because nature has better ideas, I think. And so that's been something that I've been learning. It's like, what does nature have to say about life, and how can I help the environment through, leveling up my psyche so that I'm making better choices.
I completely agree. I mean, that's another thing that I think people get wrong is, technology exists in the non-human realm. Nature is a technology. If you think of there's this subset of technology called nanotechnology, and the best book of nanotechnology ever written is called The Engines of Creation. And one of the things that Eric Drexler says is that if you think of a seed you plant in your farm, and you plant that seed in the soil, that seed is an information file that is giving instructions to the matter around it to self-organize. Like nature is nanotechnology that works. Like biology is software. I mean, it is a technology. And if anything, what we need to do is move past our wasteful, not so very good technologies and build on technologies that emulate nature. And that thing I think is something that's very exciting. There's a think tank in the Netherlands called Next Nature that takes inspiration from nature to design kind of the exotic spaces where human beings can live in the future. Things like self-assembling buildings that are built of organic matter. I mean, stuff that sounds like science fiction, but it's actually sublime.
Mm-hmm.
And when you think of the new Avatar film is coming out soon, and when the original film came out, people would report feeling depressed when they left the movie theater because they had a withdrawal. They wanted to go back to Pandora because it was so beautiful and so marvelous, and it was all about this symbiotic relationship between the local populations and nature. And they were highly sophisticated and advanced. There was nothing non-sophisticated about these beings and the way that they lived with nature. The irony, of course, is that we're using filmmaking technology, storytelling technology, the most cutting-edge 3D technology to make a film about learning to love nature more. So, I see a kind of blurring of these distinctions between technology is bad and nature's good. It's more like some technologies are terrible and wasteful. Nature is a really fantastic technology that we can improve upon and take inspiration from. And farming is a technology.
I've never loved a tractor more in my life.
There you go. I mean, there you go. And so, for example, the Netherlands, where I've been spending a lot of time now, that country's the size of Rhode Island. But the sophisticated farming techniques they develop there, they're the number 2 largest exporter of food in the world. The point is, we can become infinitely more efficient in the way we do everything in a sustainable and renewable fashion. I mean, it feels like that's the message you put out into the world. And
it's also about not being addicted to efficiency, or not being, solely motivated by efficiency, but also letting the right speed, the right pace, the cadence of nature. And nature never rushes, and it's always on time.
Right. In tune and on time, as Jamie likes to say.
Yeah. What's your relationship to nature?
Well, the irony is, here I am talking so often about innovation and creativity and often technology, but the place where I get the most inspired, the place where I find the stillness that allows for the listening, is always in nature. I talk about the aesthetic sublime, or the experience of aesthetic arrest that so often occurs in nature at sunset, looking at some beautiful vista. For me, it's an experience of the ecstatic. So my relationship with nature is ecstatic, and it's also transporting. So I'm a natural storyteller. So if you put me in a beautiful natural environment, I immediately start to tell a story. Take me to Iceland, and I'm in my own Lord of the Rings story, and I'm feeling a sense of communion and feeling of the mystical and connecting with something larger than myself. I remember I called Iceland the land of waterfall porn. There's so many waterfalls. I had so many encounters with the aesthetic sublime. So I adore nature. But I just keep coming back to this idea that we can combine the best of our genius, the best of our creativity, to harness the power of nature and build sustainably and renewably, to live in a way that we don't regeneratively and not just and thrive, and thrive.
Yeah. And what about getting out of your head? I mean, I think also
a great
getting
question,
into
my
your
friend.
body, and there's so much wisdom that's stored in your somatic being. I find when I go dig a hole, I am literally downloading information and learning through work.
Yeah, well, that's something I could probably use some work on. My ex-girlfriend used to say I wasn't enough in my body, so maybe my next step is to get a little bit more in the dirt.
Well, I invite you to come dig some holes with me at Kintsugi on the land?
Yes. I mean, I visited your house that time for that little party, but I should go back and hang out in the dirt for sure. Yes, why not?
All right, there's a shovel with your name on it, brother.
Okay, brother.
Thanks for talking to me.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for giving me a download.
It's really an honor, and thanks for the kind words. To be honest, I'm very moved to hear that, so thank you.
Cheers, brother.
Cheers.